Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Plaw, and we have a pretty exciting episode in store for us today. Last week, I was in Vancouver at Mac DevOps YVR, which was really awesome. I met a lot of really cool people. Really cool to see what people are up to in the Mac space. I actually talked to someone from Apple who was interested in getting more people with a Windows background who are in Mac management using PowerShell, which is cool to hear from Apple that they're like sort of aware of these things and how they could potentially be leveraged. I want to give a special shout out to David. He is a customer of ours, and he gave a talk about using SimpleMDM with Terraform and the whole process he went through with having to create a provider, which you can now get if you're using Terraform and SimpleMDM. Just really cool stuff in the DevOps space. And it was interesting to see so many parallels with how their community approaches things. Obviously, they're not all on PowerShell. They're using different languages, but there is that same path of having a problem, learning a language to do the problem, seeing a lot of open source projects that are very helpful, wanting and being driven to contribute from the community. A lot of the things that we sort of strive to do in the PowerShell world are present there, which is very promising. I've seen similar things in the MSP space as well. So always reassuring to see that collaborative nature present everywhere. Huge shout out. The week that we're recording this, PSConf EU, unfortunately, I'm not in attendance, but a bunch of friends are. A lot of great content. I'm excited to see some of those talks on YouTube afterwards. So shout out to everyone who's hands-on. And if you're listening to this now and you were at PSConf EU, I hope you had a fantastic time. Hope you're settling back into normal life again. And maybe I'll catch you there next year if you go again. Got a tip this week. I want to tell you about a little variable you probably don't know about, and that is $? Have you heard of it? Maybe. Looks like a bunch of symbols. Doesn't look like PowerShell, but it is. And the $? Variable, it's very handy for error handling. So it returns true if the last command was successful and false otherwise. So a cool little thing you can use. And as we know in PowerShell, there's a lot of stuff. I want to give another shout out. I'm in a tips mood right now, trying to share knowledge with the people. I've gotten some really cool messages recently where I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people really learning on this every week. So check out Set Alias. If you are using PowerShell regularly, you can customize your experience pretty quickly by using Set Alias to create custom aliases. One of the criticisms of PowerShell, it can be a little bit wordy sometimes for interactive use, especially if you have a different background where the parameters are a little wonky. Capital V is a parameter, for example. If you're into that, use aliases. Only interactively in your scripts, you're going to probably want to use the full commands just for future you who may not have those aliases set. As I said previously, we are doing a sweet giveaway from Jeff Hicks on his PowerShell scripting and toolmaking book and the PowerShell practice primer. Now, if you want to enter those, you can hit me up. Let me know your name, a little bit about your background in PowerShell, and sort of, I love meeting new people, so I love hearing your backgrounds. And you could also send us an email at powershell@pdq.com. That would work well. Shout out to everyone who's entered. I've gotten you on a lovely Excel spreadsheet, and I am ready to select that winner and give you a book. Check out discord.gg/PDQ to get caught up on all that's happening in our sort of inner circle. Check out the PowerShell scripting channel. Our guest last week, Josh Hendricks, was received with a lot of applause upon returning to the channel. And actually tonight, after recording this, you can check it out on YouTube by the time this goes live. Josh is actually going to be talking about Stucco at the Gainesville PowerShell user group. So looking forward to that. Check that out on YouTube next week, GNVPSUG. Also want to let you know that today we have a fantastic guest, and it is Brock Bingham, returning guest, friend of the podcast, and honestly, just a personal friend. We are coworkers as well. Brock is a blog writer extraordinaire. I mean, seriously, this dude crushes it. Over a decade of IT experience before pivoting into a writing role, a content role. He makes videos. He writes write-ups. He's hands-on. He's a PowerSheller as well. He and I have definitely spent dozens of hours. Brock, come on to the podcast. Turn on that camera. Get over here. Welcome to the podcast, man. Thank you for returning.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a while.
It has. Time keeps going by. It is a funny thing. And sometimes I talk with people when it's recorded, when it's not, and it's hard for me to tell when we're recording convos or not. And apparently we've had one recorded before. So thanks for returning.
Yeah,
do you remember
absolutely,
every
man.
single
Look forward
question I
to it.
asked last time?
No, I do not. In fact, maybe we'll dive into that, but I've got a terrible memory. So, I mean, this is like a brand new experience as far as I'm concerned. So let's do it.
Yes, me too. That's what I'm saying. And that's why there's going to be a theme of encouraging people to start blogging in this episode. But that's one of the benefits is you don't have to be a mega mind. It's okay. It's normal to forget things, especially with how hectic life is. If you write things down, you can remember it. If you write it down in a polished up format like a blog, it becomes a resource you can constantly refer to. And if you share that resource online with others and it proves to be helpful, well, oh my gosh, you've just went and gone and made the world a better place, Brock.
No, exactly. And, this is going to be a bit embarrassing to admit, but it's like, I'll write stuff and it'll be, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years later that I've written this, and I'll have forgotten about the topic, forgotten about the article. And then I will have to like refresh my memory on something. And I'll, of course, go to Google, search it up, whatever my question is. And the first thing that pops up is my blog that I wrote. And I'm like, I should probably know this.
I mean, I'm the same way. I wrote that secrets blog a while ago where it shows you how to like set up a secret store and secrets management and all that. And every single time I have a need for it, I just refer to it. And it kind of takes some pressure off because I don't have to remember it all. And I know that too. So I'm like, okay, we're good here.
It does. Especially doing like what I do where I'm pivoting topics all the time, And so it's like, if I'm just writing about one kind of like topic in general, every week, then that's one thing. But it's like I pivot and I like that the topics drastically change from one week to the next. So to be able to like rely on that and like fall back on it and be like, oh yeah, that's right, that's how this works, and just brush up on your skills, it works.
That's right. But what was that transition like for you to go from being an sysadmin, IT person into writing blogs? That's a bit of a change of pace.
Yeah, one that I never would have expected, and one of them that none of my English teachers would have expected either. So, because I wasn't a writer, before kind of like taking this journey. I was just a sysadmin for 10, 15 plus years. And, but like the time of my life came where it was like, hey, my family was looking to move closer to family. So we were looking to move to Utah, and that's where PDQ is headquartered. So we're looking to move to Utah at the time. And I was already using PDQ as a product. Huge fan of it, huge fan of the company, the culture, things like that. So I knew right away that was a potential avenue I wanted to research and hopefully join. So, I mean, that's kind of how this all started. It was like, hey, they don't really have a position as a just, hey, they didn't need a sysadmin at the time, but they did need a writer. And I was like, I can give it a shot. And so it was one of those things I was really nervous about. And, the PDQ, the hiring process, they make you go through all these hoops to make sure you know your stuff and everything. And one of them was writing like a blog forum. And so you submit this and you try your best. I think the topic was DNS because it's always DNS. But I mean, I just dove headfirst into this thing, and it was such a drastic change than what I've ever done. But it was so nice to be able to fall back on that experience and be like, hey, yeah, I know all this stuff. Let me just write about it in a meaningful way.
And what I like about blogs, and you might have a similar experience, is it gives you an excuse to really learn about something. It gives you a structured reason to dive in and understand the why behind maybe something you'd initially see and be like, wait, what's that? And you'd move on. But whenever you're writing a blog that others are going to see and maybe have questions about, you get an excuse to kind of dive a little bit deeper and learn something new.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a great opportunity for that. I know when I first started, that was one thing that Kelly, our boss, kept telling me. It was like, hey, every week, every time you got a new blog topic, this is a great opportunity to learn, spend a lot of hours researching that and doing whatever, and probably like half my time writing a blog is spent in that prep and learning and things like that, testing. It's not even just writing, I don't just sit down, open a document and just like go to town writing stuff. It's me like, hey, let me research, let me try to get all the facts that I can. Let me then test it in my own environment, make sure it works the way it's supposed to work, and then actually write about it.
And it's pretty cool. I'm a little bit envious of your role because the content that you create is the exact type of content that early on in my PowerShell journey, I was reading about on the PDQ blog. And now you are living that experience regularly, creating a lot of cool content. And if you didn't know, we do have a lot of PowerShell stuff on our blog and have for a long time. I don't know exactly how long, but whenever I was coming up, we were already doing a bunch of stuff. And that was maybe like 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Oh yeah, we've definitely got some older articles on there that cover some great topics, and I've gone through and I've either had to refresh or rewrite a couple of those to kind of like match our writing style these days. But yeah, we've still got some like pretty early on PowerShell articles out there that go over some great information and still hold a lot of value today.
That's what I like about blogs, is because there's official documentation which has its awesome purpose and the Microsoft Docs are good, but hearing it through someone's perspective is oftentimes more insightful, for me at least. Like, docs are a little tough to read through sometimes, especially if you don't have a strong working knowledge going into it. If you know a lot of the words and can just kind of slide it into your mind, it's a little bit easier. But otherwise, seeing someone go through the process and kind of explain it as a fellow sysadmin or IT person is super helpful.
Yeah, because you're getting that different perspective, right? You whereas Microsoft's just like, hey, here's knowledge. You're kind of on your own to adopt it and use it and whatever. Whereas a lot of my articles take an approach of like, hey, come with me on this journey, learn with me as I go on it to better understand this, how to implement it, and how to kind of like get the most value out of whatever the topic is at the time. And so yeah, there's a lot to it that really kind of like can benefit from that approach versus just here's a help file with some information on it. That way, if I go into it, I can tell you what issues I ran into, and if there's certain ways I would go about something that maybe is easier than like what official documentation is telling you how to do it. You get some tips and tricks like that too.
Yeah, because oftentimes the official docs can't always say things that aren't officially supported or that might not be part of the further roadmap. But as a blogger, you can talk about the dirty history of why things are the way they are and mistakes that happened in the past and more context or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I try to be nice. I try not to burn anybody. You got to keep those relationships up. But yeah.
I mean, I would, if I read through our DM history, I think he roasts me a good amount of the time, but I appreciate that you say that.
It's right. Fair. I was not your first choice for a guest, so, I got to give it to you when I can.
No, that is not true. You are always my first guest. And I actually have a question for you. All right. And you're on the pressure here. All right. Are we friends first or coworkers first? Because a little bit of context for those who don't know, I do work with Brock. We're on the same team now. We both do community and content stuff. But back whenever I started, I was in solutions. And so we weren't on the same team, but we both played a bunch of Rocket League together. I don't remember how we initially started hanging out, but apparently you're really good at Rocket League, which is like a car soccer game. Very weird, but you are like a top 1% of all players. And I thought I was pretty good. But you're much better than me. I think we've probably spent dozens of hours gaming together. So anyways, the question was, are we friends first or coworkers first? Be honest.
I would say friends first for sure. I think,
I would
you obviously start out as coworkers first, right? But, and you kind of, there's that natural transition into, this person is my friend. Someone that I can rely on, someone that I can go to when I need help, someone that after hours, like I don't mind spending time with this person. So yeah, I'd say our relationship has flourished and blossomed into a thriving friendship.
There we go. And you like how I asked that live on the air, so your answer's recorded, nice and under the pressure. That's why I like this podcast, because there's that live element a little bit. And some people, well, myself included, live stuff can be a little challenging, but we're recording it live. And for those who, I don't think I mentioned it yet, but I am a little bit under the weather. I've been out this week. And I'm fighting the urge to have a cough drop right now. So if you see me mute and just cough randomly, you know exactly why. But back to the whole coworkers thing. It is nice to have some coworkers that turn into friends. I think that in general, you should think of coworkers as a professional relationship where you can enjoy each other's company, but occasionally if you hit it off, feel free to run it up. And we share the same passion about helping sysadmins and people in IT. A lot of the content that you do is you kind of, from what I see with a lot of your popular PowerShell stuff, it's like higher level beginner focused stuff, and then deep diving into specific things like VS Code, customizing it for PowerShell, or Git and GitHub topics, all the way down to top PowerShell commands. Sort of, if you don't really know where to get started, here's some cool commands, how to use if statements, looping, all kinds of programmatic structures like that.
Yeah, and a lot of these topics come because it's kind of like it's a natural progression for a sysadmin, especially. So those are all like PowerShell topics and stuff. It's like, hey, on their journey to learning PowerShell, these are the types of questions that they're probably going to be asking, and we can kind of dive into those specific things and answer them. And I usually do kind of take that. I still consider myself a beginner, especially in like PowerShell, just because there's so much you can obviously do with PowerShell that I think you really have to progress in that before you can start considering yourself at like Andrew's level, But but like the early stuff, the early questions about specific commands, how to use them, and things like that, they work a lot better for blog content because more people are looking for them. Sometimes I get asked like, hey, I have a challenging like PowerShell thing specifically, maybe you could write about that. And it's like, well, we could, but you might be the only person that ever looks at that specific example. You're trying to catch more readers and whatnot. And I'm not saying that those things aren't good, but at the end of the day, it's like when you're writing, you also have to write for an audience. You're trying to bring in more readers and stuff like that. So, there's a little bit of a challenge there. So you kind of have to take the topics that you get and kind of like weigh them, which ones bring in the most value, which ones are the most helpful to our readers and stuff, and which ones are a little more niche that isn't going to get a lot of attention.
And one thing that you and I share with our roles, which is sort of where I was going with the question earlier before I got distracted, was we're in a position where we get to focus on helping people in IT. That is our job. Whatever helps people the most is what we can do. And to kind of live in that space, it is very invigorating for me. It's very nice to feel connected to that. Obviously, jobs, there's always downsides, but when you can feel connected to the impact that you're having, and I can say I've heard from many people come up to me at conferences and things like that and talk about the great blogs that we have. And guess what? They're not talking about mine. They're talking about yours and the rest of our awesome writers that we have. So definitely having an impact out there. And especially if you look at the view counts on some of these, it's really cool to see that you write something one time, you learn while you do it, and all of a sudden, 2 years down the road, it's still helping people. They're still stumbling upon it. It's very interesting for me to see the pipeline to PowerShell is still going. There are still people who are just starting, people listening to this podcast right now who are just beginning their journeys. And there are also people on this podcast who have gone through it and are now at that really high level where they're able to apply PowerShell very easily and have good technical knowledge on whatever stuff they're working on in the day-to-day. Takes all types. And it's really cool that we get to live in a community that appreciates all those people. It's not like in the PowerShell, well, if you're a beginner, we don't enjoy it. No, we actually thrive upon that. We love bringing people up. And that's sort of what we do, man.
Yeah. And honestly, since day one here, my favorite thing has been to hear that something that I wrote or created, I obviously do like videos and stuff now as well, but to hear that something that I created helped somebody else. I love working for PDQ. It's an amazing company. There's amazing people here to work with. There's so many like benefits to working here and everything. And I can't say enough good things about it, but by far my favorite thing is like when someone reaches out and be like, hey, this helped me in some way. A lot of times it'll be coming from our solutions team. They're like, thank you for writing this. Like, I seriously just sent your blog to this person and it like solved all of their problems.
Yeah, that's huge. Please, if you're listening out here, don't just send it to Brock and I, but if you read a blog and it's helpful for you, if you got a little bit of spare bandwidth, reach out to them and let them know. Like you heard earlier on the pre-show where I was talking about how, reach out if you want to enter, let me know a little bit about your background, because it really does mean a lot when you can understand at least some of who your audience is or some of the other people out there, because we really are all in this whole IT thing together. And it's nice when we can make those connections and be a little bit less isolated and a little bit more connected to the impact that we're having. So
yeah,
it doesn't just have to be Brock and I.
The best part of the job.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Sharon Redgrave, who reached out this week in the UK, former librarian starting a career in IT, listen to every podcast episode. Sharon, I wish you well. I really do. And I appreciate so much that you reached out and shared a little bit about you and appreciate the kind words. It really does. I try and save some of them just to kind of get me going on tough days, because doing a weekly podcast and some of the other stuff can be a little tiring at times, especially if you're not feeling like, oh yeah, that's right, there are people who are being helped every week. I try and remind myself of that. But I love talking about this stuff, and I think I talk about it a good amount. So we can pivot here, and that would be a pivot to, what is your most favorite blog, your most favoritist that you've ever written?
Ooh, that I've ever written? Gosh, you did not prepare me for that one. That's for sure.
Oh no, of course not.
I would say one. I don't know if I have a specific favorite, but I'll give you two things. I'll give you two answers. So I love my PowerShell articles. In fact, I love them so much that I go on spurts where it's like, hey, I won't write a PowerShell article for like 6 months, maybe even more, just because the topics, maybe we're working on refreshes, or we've got features coming out that we need to write about, or whatever. PowerShell articles are always my favorite to write. It's my favorite general topic. Just because I feel like I'm learning so much as I go through it, and PowerShell is cool because you get to apply what you're learning, like right then and there. You have a terminal window open, or you have VS Code open. It's like, hey, let me try this command, and I put it in and I see the output and everything. And that feels so good to be able to learn something and instantly apply it and stuff. So there's that. But the blog that kind of stands out the most to me is my RoboCopy blog. This was probably my biggest blog I've ever written. This thing, you'll be scrolling for days getting to the bottom of this article. And it was, the reason that it's like stands out is, I don't know if favorite is the right word, but anyways, the reason it stands out to me is because of the effort that I put into it. There was so much content there about RoboCopy, right? It's been around forever. There are so many switches and parameters that you can use with RoboCopy, and to really understand them, I'm scouring the web, trying to learn as much about it as I possibly can. Obviously I'm a sysadmin. I know, enough about RoboCopy to get by, to do my job for the most part, but there's so many just little tips and tidbits of information, and even stuff out there that's hey, this is gospel knowledge about RoboCopy on these online resources. I was finding some of that, and I'm this isn't right, And so I would spend hours testing a certain thing, how does this actually work, finding that out. And it turned into just this massive blog that took me 2 or 3 weeks to write and to test and all this other stuff. So that one, from the sheer amount of effort that went into it, that one really stands out.
RoboCopy is a big topic for sure. I remember when you wrote that blog and it came out, and I was like, what? Dude, the dudes wrote a book about this. But there really is so many parameters to RoboCopy. It is its own world.
Yeah. I want to say the document, obviously when you're on a blog, you're just scrolling, but I want to say the Word doc or Google Doc, whatever I was working on at the time. I want to say it was 50 something pages. Granted, there's quite a few images and stuff in there, but it was massive. So yeah.
Well, there we go. And one theme and one takeaway I wanted for our listeners to get was to get started on their own blog. And to get started, you don't need to write a 50-page breakdown of something. You can get started with something as simple as you find a little one line of code that does something for you, write a blog about it, share it for future you. You can copy and paste it. You can explain your reasoning, a little bit of context, maybe have a couple links to where you can find the module or whatever it is. But get started slow, get started small. Shout out to everyone who has started as a listener of the podcast, no blog, and took the advice and started their blog and shared an article with me. And if you do that to me, I will totally share it on the podcast going forward. So feel free to reach out if you are starting a blog and doing things. But it is just, you want to have that as part of your resume and portfolio, because Brock, your freaking portfolio as a writer is huge, which is kind of wild. As a former IT sysadmin, to now have a huge portfolio of hundreds of pages that you've written is kind of cool. Not saying everyone else out there has to do it to that extent, but you'd be surprised if you start a practice over the years, you find an opportunity once or twice a year to write a blog. Time's going to keep passing. You're probably going to still be in IT 5 years later. Well, maybe you have 10 blog posts. Maybe one of those is something that you're a little bit passionate about and dove a little bit deeper and could be a good representation of your technical skills. I want to circle back to something you said earlier, and that was that you're a PowerShell beginner. And you think that I'm not. So because you think that I'm not, I can confidently say that you are certainly not a PowerShell beginner. If you are able to have conversations about PowerShell that makes sense and you're understanding what's going on, you are, I'd say, advanced, if not super high medium level. But I've worked dozens of hours on PowerShell with you, and you definitely know your stuff. Maybe I'm slightly faster at doing some of the things, but you have a really good working knowledge, and you've written scripts. You can write scripts if you wanted to right now. You could come up with those scripts pretty quick. So you're not a beginner.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's hard. It's like, I see what like the works that other people do, and they might have these scripts that are 500 lines long, doing all this, IT wizardry and stuff. And it's to look at that and then like compare yourself to it. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just starting my journey here, And so I do get that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all learning PowerShell. Nobody's mastered it. The thing with PowerShell is a lot of it is kind of like your imagination. You learn the tools, but then it's like without that imagination to think outside the box and apply those tools in meaningful ways, then you just know information without knowing how to apply it. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. So yeah, it's, I appreciate the feedback. And yeah, I mean, my PowerShell journey is I've definitely grown over the years. And that's why I love writing about it, is because I do feel that like, as soon as I write an article, I feel, hey, I grew from this, I'm a little bit smarter
So much fun
because of it.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point about imagination and stuff like that, I think that really PowerShell, whenever you're using it to solve problems, it is creative problem solving. Sometimes there's going to be only one command you can run that kind of turns on a switch or turns off a switch. That's fine. But when you need to connect things or write a script that solves some problem, you get to tap into a very fun part of your brain, especially once you have enough PowerShell familiarity to be able to type commands and not be too confused and have to look up stuff and get overwhelmed. Once you can push through that part, my goodness, man, it is such an enjoyable process. I think it's what hooks so many of us, is how fun that process is of having a problem, figuring out how you're going to solve it, and all of a sudden you have a reusable asset that you can use to consistently solve this problem forever. You can share with others, you can write a blog about, you can do whatever with, publish it to the gallery. Very, very nice tool set we have here.
Yeah, and that's that's actually one of the things that I kind of struggle with is, I say, oh, you need this imagination to see how to apply it and stuff. But as I've moved out of the dedicated like IT space and now kind of in this content role, I run into those issues less and less because I'm not applying this like, I don't spend 40 hours a week doing IT stuff. So I'm not seeing the everyday problems that people are experiencing. So as I go through and I'm writing these, especially PowerShell blogs, I'm always trying to think of like, oh, what's an actual example that could help somebody, they could see this example and maybe it would solve an issue for them. And that's actually kind of like one of my struggles as I write these things. I'm like, oh, I don't know what necessarily like struggles are out there that people are having right now because I'm not living that IT life every day anymore.
I can relate to that. I can also relate to, it's hard to have that beginner's perspective when you're so far away from being a brand new beginner. There's so much that whenever I'm reading a blog or something like that I take for granted, that I take that my knowledge of it or whatever, it's like not common to everyone. They have to go through the journey, run into that one problem that I did that most people run into, learn from it and realize that this other route's the right way to go. And
see, Andrew's at that part of the journey where he gets to, oh, I got to learn something. So he goes to the blog, then he scrolls all the way to the bottom because he knows all the rest of it. He's just looking for that one specific answer,
Good point. Sometimes I do enjoy a nice little journey, especially if someone takes you on the journey with them, like you do in some of the blogs, where it's like, oh, I can learn with them, alongside them on their journey. I really enjoy those. But, and this is very important in the world of AI and these kinds of tools, having a working vocabulary to talk about PowerShell and these other things, and having kind of spent enough time with things to be able to slot them in your mind and kind of pick up pieces here and there is really helpful. Because when you're dictating things to AI, you're going to want to make sure you use the right words to describe what you're trying to do. And also, if AI gives you something and it doesn't make any sense, you have enough of a working knowledge to know why. So I think that AI tools are great, but you're still going to have to learn PowerShell to a certain degree. Maybe not regex, maybe you can use it for some of that stuff, but having a working knowledge is going to benefit you for the rest of your career. It's going to be enjoyable, like you said, and it's going to prep you to be able to use LLMs to maybe write different languages or just write your PowerShell scripts with that and then fix them because you know how PowerShell works.
Yeah, I definitely don't see AI as like taking over for people that are writing like PowerShell scripts and stuff. It's not just going to do it for you. Without you directing it, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to be able to understand what you're asking it to do. You've got to be able to understand the results, and you know your environment that you're working in. You know the results that you're trying to expect. AI is not going to figure that stuff out for you. So,
Yep. And on the PDQ webcast, so every single Thursday, we do a YouTube live stream for an hour. We're actually talking about AI prompts and how to make use of it. And one thing I can share is that what I've seen for our examples, like say an onboarding script, the first result isn't going to be the best way to create a tool. You're going to have to follow up because maybe the parameters are hard coded and you want it to be a script where you can provide the parameters dynamically as you go. You don't have to edit the script file and save it. Well, those are things you're going to need to know about beforehand. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck at level 1 PowerShell for a while, and you're not really creating tools in the way that they are most distributable and reusable. So I guess it's great you're listening to the podcast right now because you're on the right path. Thanks for listening. Oh, such a fun journey, man. I love that we get to see other people kind of come up and learn their stuff and turn out. And sometimes they do more impressive things than I could ever imagine.
Oh, for sure. Looking at some of the users over on Discord, I mean, they blow me away. You get some newer users on there that go from like, you feel like ground zero, where it's like, hey, I'm just starting my IT journey here. And within like weeks, months, they're just like growing so much, and you see their progress, and it's mind-boggling, and we're fortunate enough to have this environment in our Discord server that so many people are so helpful. Everybody's just chiming in, trying to help one another grow and succeed. So it's really a really cool place to hang out, especially as you start this journey in your IT career or PowerShell pathing or whatever the case may be.
Yep. And I cannot overstate how important it is to actually get involved in a community. Whatever that is to you. Yeah, that could be the Discord community, the PDQ Discord. That could be the PowerShell Discord. That could be, if you're in the MSP space, an MSP specific Discord. You want to make sure that they are encouraging of new people. You want to make sure that it's a place where you can ask questions without being lambasted. But you need to find that community if you really want to reach that next level of your career with a lot less suffering. Because there are many people like Brock and I who are happy to go along that journey with you, and you don't have to do it alone. And I made the mistake of being just like, oh, I'm going to internalize all this by myself, and eventually I'll be good enough to say things publicly and not feel like an idiot. Truth is, we all start somewhere. We all do. And it is in the best interest of the IT world at large if we help people get up to speed as fast as possible. We all benefit. The security landscape of the world increases as we're able to take advantage of tools like PowerShell to make our workload a little bit lighter.
Yeah, exactly. And having that as a resource, like our Discord server, and I'm not saying it's the only resource out there. Obviously, like Reddit is a huge one and stuff like that. But it would have helped me so much when I started this journey in IT. Even like there's Spiceworks, there's Reddit, there's and I would post questions and stuff, and these are just general things, but like they might be a day or two, or maybe never even would receive an answer, to certain things. But yet here you have this like constant, basically live chat going on in Discord, where like you post something, and I mean, it's usually seconds to minutes before people are like chiming in with answers and help, and just general information to help you along your way.
It is so helpful. Yeah, why did I do that, dude? I mean, I guess I'm glad I learned from my mistakes, and now I'm trying to fix those mistakes for others, which is really what we do here in IT. We encounter a problem, we try and fix it, and then we try and make sure it doesn't break again. And if it does, we have some kind of mitigations around it that we can reuse.
And that's what automation's for, right?
That's it.
If you gotta do it more than once, automate it.
And I love seeing how many different communities have that mindset. It's not just PowerShell that is starting to get that. Because as someone who's like into communities and into humans and people and seeing where we are with things, I've been very reassured this year by tapping into different communities and seeing where they are with things. There's many communities that are way more with it, way less toxic than my experiences maybe 10 years ago. So really cool to see. Hopefully it makes IT a little bit more of a welcoming and easy space to upskill. Because I think that culture where like you need to be an expert before you say anything, or you always act like you know everything, is actually massively counterproductive. And I'm guilty of doing that in my career. I've talked about it in like talks and stuff before, where it's like, I need to be known as the expert and know everything. It's kind of like that Dunning-Kruger thing. It's like you don't know much, but you think you know everything. And then you learn more and you realize, holy crap, there's a lot to learn. And it takes time to get through that. And you got to be patient with yourself through that whole period. There's no way to skip that learning process. Just be aware of it, be patient, and enjoy the ride, because eventually you're going to be on the other end of that. And you're going to remember back to when things were still new and fun. And they're still fun, but like brand new. It's like you learn about this new feature and whoa, like import Excel. Never heard of that before. What the heck? I can do so much. That journey is just something you're going to reflect on for a long time.
Yeah. And I think those type of people that are okay with making mistakes and owning mistakes, they, in the long run, those are the smartest people, right? Because they don't stop growing. They don't stop learning. As you make mistakes, I mean, that's what leads to that massive growth. And I know that I've struggled with that at times, especially like kind of having a public facing role here, with my content being out there and videos being out there. I am not a public type of guy. I like to keep to myself. I like to, stay home. You're not going to find me at the bars or clubs or anything like that, So I'm a pretty private guy, but being this role out here that's kind of like public facing was a very big challenge for me. Is like I had to like, hey, I'm not used to this. I am not, this is not my comfort zone. And like every week when I'm recording videos and stuff, I am still just like a nervous wreck. But I get through it, I own it, and I do what I can. And so and every week I feel like I get better at it. I'm learning more. And that's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah. And I think as time goes on and you see, hey, the world didn't explode because I made a video, maybe it'll keep easing you and like take care of that part of you that's a little concerned. But I can definitely relate to that. Prior to realizing that in order to help people, I had to be public, I was private on LinkedIn. My Twitter was kind of private, all this stuff. And then eventually I had to make the choice of like, all right, I'm definitely having to give up some privacy in order to be public and connect with more people, but let's do it. Let's do it. And here we are.
That's something that I'm still working on. I still don't do the social media thing. I need to be better at that. But it was never my cup of tea. Even with like early days, Facebook, MySpace, that stuff just, I don't know. I'm the type of person, it's like, hey, I've got like a close knit group of friends, and so I was okay with that. And so I didn't need all my stuff out there publicly. But now that I kind of like am in this role, I do see how that like benefits people and really kind of like helps the community and stuff. So
on what you said earlier about sort of having a public presence and being concerned with how it'll be received, I can relate to that a large amount, both internally, wanting to keep looking like a good player, but also publicly. It's like, oh no, these people who I look up to and who've written such impressive things are going to read my stuff and it's not up to snuff. But most people, in fact, nobody I've talked to reads or views the community like a competition like that. And in order for me to get more comfortable with not knowing things and being okay saying that, it took a little bit of personal growth. Like I had to be comfortable with myself and like remind myself like, okay, wait, we want honesty here. We want to actually learn and get feedback, and you have to be honest with yourself in order to do that. And no one's going to hate you for being a human. It's a very human thing to make mistakes and to not know everything, to not be an expert in everything. That just means you're a human. And where I work, we employ humans. So it's a good fit.
Yeah. That was one of my biggest struggles when I first started writing about PowerShell, because I had before starting at PDQ, I had tiptoed into PowerShell a little bit. I used it just whenever I needed to, right? Some Active Directory stuff, trying to automate a few little things here and there. And it was, mostly finding code, modifying it to fit my needs and using it. But so when I started writing about it, that was a very big, like I was so self-conscious about, oh, people are going to look at this code and they're going to be like, what is this guy thinking? And that's okay. It's like if I write something and it's, obviously I test stuff and I make sure that it works before I put it out there. And, but maybe it's not like, oh, hey, this is best practice to do it this way. Maybe I didn't follow best practice or whatever the case may be, but I still get the outcome that I'm looking for. That was a big like worry for me, that I'm like, hey, these scripts are going to live out there on the internet and people are going to analyze them and just ridicule me because I didn't follow best practice, you know? And so it's like, it's stuff like that you just got to shrug off and be like, hey, you know, if somebody writes in and says, hey, I think you should maybe rewrite the script and try this approach or whatever, I'm like, that's okay. Write me, let me know, you know, if there's a better approach, I would love to hear it and be okay with that feedback.
Yep. It is a journey. It's cool because we're talking about a lot of technical stuff, learning PowerShell, but also there is that human and emotional intelligence side of things where it gives us an excuse to grow as people. So I love how we get that both. Like I love the technical side of problem solving, but I also love the opportunity to grow as people and be better coworkers, better family members, whatever it may be over time. It kind of gives you a nice little path to work on both. So shout out to everyone out there they're grinding with us. They're growing with us. We're all growing together in our own ways. And we don't need to compare ourselves to each other.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Don't compare yourself to each other. Just help each other grow. You know, you'll feel so much better about yourself by like just taking a few minutes out of your day to like help someone learn something. Oh my gosh, man, that is like the best feeling ever.
Yep. And I love it because it solidifies my knowledge of something. And also personally, you've probably seen this with me whenever we work together. It is easier for me to code when someone is watching me code than it is to do it by myself. I mean, we've done that before, right? Where we're like, Andrew, can you help me with this? And then I'll end up saying, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And then I'll just type furiously and like, oh, what the heck's that name of the variable again? And then like type 3 lines. And then
yeah, no, I mean, you're just like, half the time I can't tell if you're talking to me or talking to yourself, but yeah, I mean, you just kind of like get into this flow state and just start like coding like crazy. And it's really cool to watch, man. I wish like, you know, if you guys get the opportunity, like, I don't know if we do any more of those lunch and learn type of sessions on our Discord or whatnot, but man, watching this guy go to town and just start writing stuff is really cool to see. And it like pumps him up too.
Oh, I love it. We got to get on Twitch. We got to do a Twitch stream sometime where we code together. We set it out there. We set it in the ether. I guess we got to deliver.
You know, I'm always down. This face is on camera enough these days, so might as well.
So we'll see. Maybe we'll do some coding live streams in the future, Brock. That could be pretty fun.
That would be cool. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I love watching you code. I mean, it's just like, it kind of like shows me, hey, I wish I could get to this level, you know, and it kind of gives me like a goal in mind.
Well, gosh, I didn't expect you to go there. Well, thank you. I've had the same experience with someone on my journey where it's like, oh, wow, I can see them code. And it was Josh King, is the name of that person. And I learned so much. I would wake up at like 4 a.m. because they're in New Zealand to catch their streams. I would wake up super early because I was on that PowerShell hype. Like, oh my gosh, this could change my life. I can automate these problems I've been manually doing for freaking ever. What? And there's also the upside of like, I can actually code things, not just work stuff, but like, I think Josh was writing a Secret Santa picker type game. It's like, oh, wow. Once I have this toolbox, I can solve all kinds of problems with it. And it is very nice to have that toolbox available to you on every system, cross-platform, open source. Oh, my goodness. Get yourself VS Code while you're at it. Put them together. Oh, man. You can code anywhere.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's more accessible than ever, right? And being more accessible than ever means it's more relevant than ever. So, gosh, I mean, it's like, you know, people think, oh, hey, PowerShell's been out forever these days. You know, I kind of missed that bandwagon. You didn't miss it. I mean, it's only growing.
Yep. Very exciting time to get into the space. And I appreciate everyone out there who's getting into it with us. You're on the journey. We're on it together. Fantastic. Boombastic. Now, Brock, are you prepared for the consistent questions? The common parameters, as they were?
I will do my best.
All right. And I have, you know, the questions I told you I'm going to ask? I may just change them right now, starting with, what is the best, and I don't know why I keep going back to Disney, but I don't know. I feel like it's broad. A lot of people might have heard of it. What is the best Disney song ever?
Ooh. Best Disney song ever. I'm going to go with Aladdin, A Whole New World.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
I mean, I'm old, and so Aladdin was my jam growing up, you know?
To all the parents out there, I'm going to choose the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse song Am I? Yeah, I won't even sing it. But you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I've got kids. I went through that phase for sure.
Oh gosh, MICKEYMOUSE. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. Favorite module ever in existence?
I
You can only pick one.
Oh gosh, dang. Okay, I'm only going to pick one, but I mean, I got to give a shout out to PS Readline because it makes our lives easier, right?
Good call.
Right. I would say the Active Directory module, just because when I was kind of like rocking that sysadmin lifestyle, that is what I relied on a lot for PowerShells. That's where I spent a lot of my time was, just automating like onboarding, offboarding, automating just tasks and stuff in general in Active Directory, automating reporting and things like that. Like when my boss came and she's like, hey, here's information I want based on our users. Can you pull it out of Active Directory, and be able to like build reports and stuff using PowerShell? I mean, yeah, the Active Directory module was where it was at for me. Probably not the most exciting one, but
I mean, it really is. If you're able to apply it, it is a very exciting module. If it's relevant to your daily work, there's a ton you can do with that. That is its own world where you can get lost and really get a whole bunch of stuff done in your organization. Now, I will give mine, if you don't mind there, Brock.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I choose Import Excel. Very powerful. We should do a blog on it in the future. You or I should. Maybe we can collab on it. But Import Excel is so freaking powerful. My favorite use of it is it's this little template here. You query something, you loop through each thing you queried, and you add it to an Excel workbook or its own worksheet. I've done this in the past for like information about licensing for all of our different offices at a previous job. Looped through each office, got each member of each office, found out the licenses that they were using, summed it up, put it on a worksheet, and had a worksheet at the bottom for each office. So I could hand that to the accounting person and they could click around. I never needed to talk to them again. And it wasn't my job I was fixing. It was apparently my boss was spending like hours a month putting this all together. I got PowerShell skills. In a couple hours, I was able to put something together that would save a ton of time, which always feels so powerful. I'm like, I wrote a few lines and I don't have to do it again. Sick.
Oh, for sure.
Fun
I mean, that's like
stuff right there.
So if I had to, I said like my favorite thing to do is to hear that something that I wrote or created or did help somebody else, right? And that is definitely number one on my list. But to be able to automate something out of your life is so rewarding, right? I mean, it's like you've got this thing that just, oh, hey, I do this every single day, or I do this weekly, and it's just this tedious task that I hate. That, hey, you know what? I could go on this little journey, spend a couple hours researching or whatever, and create something that just makes this problem disappear for me. I mean, that is such a just huge weight off your shoulders. It feels so good.
Yep. And if you don't think in those terms, as you go through your PowerShell journey, you will start thinking about things in terms of, let's solve this problem once and for all. Let's create a tool to make sure we don't ever have to manually do this again. And it is it changes the way you approach problem solving, which has been one of the most transformative things that I've gotten from this whole PowerShell thing. It's changed the way I think about everything really, but problem solving in particular.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I mean, that's kind of the struggle that I have is like, hey, I don't necessarily have the problems that I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to write articles for other people now. So I'm trying to think of their problems and stuff that, we're helping solve in the article. So big shout out to the Discord. If you got issues and stuff you want to hear about, I'm always down to like add topics to my schedule and write about them. So yeah, if you want to be heard, you want your questions answered, hit us up in Discord.
Discord.gg/PDQ. You are Brock Star emoji. We just call you Brock Star though. I'm just letting people know it's an emoji. I don't want to, confuse. All right. You got it. All right. People listening, we've talked about blogs. They're awesome. Maybe they've heard of, I kind of toot this horn a little bit and tell people to start blogging. Maybe they've heard of GitHub Pages and they're like, oh, I could do a blog for free. What advice do you have to someone who is interested in blogging but has never written a single article and maybe has some trepidation about actually putting things out there?
Don't worry about it. Do it for you. Like, so obviously doing it for a company, we've got some like rules that we try to follow, some structures that we try to maintain. SEO is obviously huge. We are trying to bring in traffic. And I mean, you've got to write for your audience, right? so it's hard. It's like, hey, I want to write a certain way. I want it to just be the Wild West. I want to write how I talk. I want to just like lay the information out there. But unfortunately, we got to rely on Google, you know? And so it's like, hey, you know, I'm doing this so other people can read it. So I've got to write in a way that Google will rank it higher than other people. So I try my best to make sure that like, hey, I'm kind of finding the best of both worlds, right? I'm writing like, hey, in my style, but I'm also trying to meet those SEO expectations. But for you, just go out there and do it. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about punctuation. It doesn't matter how good your grammar is. All that's important is that you did it and the information is good. And that's really all it is. Don't be like terrified that somebody's going to like analyze your stuff. If they want to give feedback on something, great. Let them give feedback on something, but do it for you, you know, above all else. Just put it out there. It can be short. It can be straight to the point. It can be whatever you want it to be, and just leave it at that.
Because the hardest part is getting started. It really is. And if you can make that any easier, whenever I started blogging, my thing was like, okay, I'm just going to put out these blogs. Like you said, not perfect, not polished, give myself plenty of room to grow over time. And that's what you do, because getting started is so hard. So get started super simple and easy. Try and be a little bit consistent, maybe every month, maybe ever whatsoever, you add a new one. And then all of a sudden, 5 blogs in, you're going to be like, okay, this isn't as scary. Maybe I could, if I wanted to, put a little bit more effort here and there and make it a little bit more polished up if you wanted to. Again, you don't have to. Like you said, be selfish with it. Create these resources for you. And maybe over time, they will end up helping someone else out. Maybe not. It's a win no matter what, because you have a working knowledge base. You have an increased portfolio. Some more good stuff to add to the resume. So awesome. All right, Brock. Well, if people get started blogging, we can thank you.
You know, I would love to see it. Like I said, just go out there and it can be a paragraph. It can be 2 paragraphs. It can take you 5 minutes to write this and upload it and put it out there and save it. And you've done something. Trust me, you'll feel good about it too. Like, hey, I accomplished this thing. I created this thing. And whether it helps other people or just helps you, I mean, it's still helping. So, and it's helping you grow and learn.
Challenge alert, challenge alert. Hello, PowerShell Podcast listeners. If you're listening to this now, I'm issuing you a challenge. The first person to create a blog and publish their first post, I'll send you some swag. Okay? I didn't ask for approval to do this. I'm doing it. We're live, Brock. PowerShell at pdq.com, or you can hit me up on any socials. I'm Andrew Pla, or at Andrew Pla Tech. Awesome, Brock. Well, thank you for a fantastic conversation. And for everyone out there listening, maybe you're driving, maybe you're walking, maybe you're running to work. Hopefully not. You might be a little bit sweaty. Maybe you got showers there. That'd be great. But if you're listening to this right now, you're a friend of the podcast. I wish you well on your PowerShell journey. And I'm honored, honestly, that you're including us in that. Give us a 5-star review or a 4-star. But let's go 5-star on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Brock, we are everywhere. And every single week, over 2 years. My gosh, PowerShell to the people. If you see it, got some coworkers, feel free to share it with them if you enjoyed an episode or enjoy the podcast. We want to get PowerShell everywhere. Check us out on Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. Huge thanks to Brock for joining me. It's been a bit of a wild week, but we did it, dude. Thanks for joining.
We did do it. You know what? Get feeling better. You deserve it. You deserve to feel great.
Honestly, after this call, I'm pretty fired up. The most excited and energy I've had in at least 4 days. So thank you for that.
I'm glad I could help.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.